All right, well, this is going to be one of the worst Bible studies you've ever watched for the maybe one person that watches it. I laugh because you're not going to watch myself. It's just going to be me talking about the Bible and contextualizing a thought tied to the church. So, yeah, this is maybe. I wish I could make it funny. It's not so funny. But what is the church? So you wake up, uh, maybe you pop on YouTube or Facebook for a minute, or even YouTube, and you basically see the things that you've been talking about or interested in or that you commented on before. Somehow it pops up in your feed. So, yeah, I guess the Anglican Church had 80 pastors or something, or 80 priests. I laugh because they're not called pastors, right? That went to be now Roman Catholic. And the first comment that I read was, "Welcome home to the true church." So the true church had Paul under its authority. Paul, after he was Saul who became Paul, went directly to Jerusalem, went directly to Peter, and asked him specifically, "What must I do in my call to be an apostle? I come under your authority because you are the rock. You are the man. You are the foundation of the church, Peter. And I submit myself and my apostolic authority to you because you're the head of the church. I come to you in Rome because the church is Catholic and it's from Rome under its authority." Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like the biblical protocol for the Apostle Paul? For if you're an Anglican priest, should all authority come from Rome? Well, that's why I said this is kind of a weird way to introduce a video. Usually when you preach, you're not supposed to make stuff up or teach. Preaching. Well, I guess it is preaching because at this point, it's a little more uh, in your face, I guess. Is that what preaching means, in your face? Well, I guess preaching maybe is a little bit more persuasive oriented. Anyways, let's read this. So I studied Greek. Maybe for every 100 words I still have memorized, maybe 10%. But when you see them like this, word by word, then maybe you're like, okay, I want to learn Greek, or you're like, forget that. So I'm kind of like, I kind of still like it. I like the word flow sometime. And then really, if you get somewhere you're really like, man, I don't know what that word means. All you got to do is go get a book or, enroll at a seminary class or, something like that. But being joking now. All you got to do is just go to ChatGPT. Go to ChatGPT, whatever, however you say it, and be like, what does this word mean right here? Gospel, the good news. Eugalion, if I'm saying that right. So, yeah, it will tell you everything in the Greek. It has stored all the Greek text. You can ask it about textual criticism, because I came upon a word very interesting in Luke that I didn't know was a variant. So, yeah. Yeah, so I just picked this Bible up today. It was sitting over here by where my coffee's at, so that's why I'm using this. Usually I just pick up a normal Bible or whatever. I don't know. So, yeah, verse 11. We'll just start here. We could go back 11 verses before and start in the beginning of the book, but we're not. We're going to look at the specific section that's called Paul's Call to an Apostleship. So I think this is the NKJV. So it kind of just smooths out a couple of these words, but the text is built on the majority text. But I may known to you, brethren, that the gospel which I preached by me is not according to man. Verse 11. Kind of look at it here. Not according to man. Okay. For neither, I gotta read it through the phone. For I neither received it from man, nor was I taught it, but it came through the revelation of Jesus Christ. Right there, it just demolishes any idea of the Roman Catholic Church. If papal authority came through Peter, then this comment right here couldn't exist. For you have heard of my former conduct in Judaism, how I persecuted the church of God beyond measure and tried to destroy it. Verse number 13. Let's come down here. Let's look at it from the Greek. Okay, we'll just read it from the order of the Greek. Neither for I, from man, received it, not was taught it, but through a revelation of Jesus Christ. So I used to kind of know the Greek verbs. It's crazy how I just totally forget them all. Words like "ba" I still remember. That word's sort of easy to remember. Apocalyphthes. So from where we get the book, the Revelation, Apocrypha. No, it's not coming from that idea, because that is not the correct idea. It's coming from the apocalypse, the end. All right, that's confusing. I get it. Of Jesus Christou. So this whole movement to call Jesus in his Greek or in his Hebrew name makes no sense to me either, because Jesus' name is in the Greek. So if you want to feel like you're divinely inspired, being close to the original name of Jesus, that's what he goes by, then maybe you should use his Greek name. So it's just like a slap in everyone's face today. Okay, so yeah, we know that Paul was Saul in his road to Damascus, how the Lord appeared to him. In 1 Corinthians 15, the King James uses that he was one born out of due time, or the concept that he was basically the last born apostle. I don't think that's quite right, but that he was the last of the apostles infers into the idea in in 1 Corinthians 15. Okay, so back to verse 14. I advanced in Judaism beyond many of my contemporaries in my own nation, being more exceedingly zealous for the traditions of my fathers. So if you go to like Colossians 2, he says he counts all these things dung, King James, rubbish. There's already been a couple things I've said that, like with this apocalypse, that aren't quite spot on. So don't think, I could definitely tell you that if you're picking up an inference of what the Apocrypha is, that was definitely not correct by just looking at a Greek word. So, and then something else I said that was referring to 1 Corinthians 15, I would have to actually go in and kind of isolate those words and try to communicate them from what they mean from the original. But I definitely can't do that now. And I'm not even sure from the original what they mean. I just kind of gave you the King James idea. But Paul was definitely the last of the apostles. There's no one in the New Testament that claimed to be an apostle on the level of Peter, James, John, and all the apostles. So, for you have heard of my former conduct in Judaism, how I persecuted the church beyond measure. We read that, verse 14. You can go to Colossians 2 if you want to check out more of these descriptions. But when it pleased God who separated me from my mother's womb and called me through his grace. Well, that is interesting. He separated me from my mother's womb and called me through his grace. How is that even possible if you're not a Calvinist? Right? If you're not believing in the preordained foreknowledge of God, the knowledge, because the word foreknowledge must mean that God preordained. So there's a substitution in thought between foreknowledge and preordination. That basically foreknowledge is the equivalent of foreordination. So in whom God foreordained, not in whom he foreknew, those he predestined. Which is sort of a logical construct that has sort of a possibility, but a sort of possibility isn't a full-fledged substitution of thought. So Calvinism is a digression of man's ability to think and substitution of what the text says and what the Spirit teaches. So, how is it possible then that Paul can make this statement? Well, it's possible because whom God foreknew, he had a plan. And this plan began before we're born. And Paul was known by God. Paul talks about, I think here in Galatians, maybe Colossians as well, that it's in here, that he was, that we come to know God, or rather have known of God, then how turn we back to the beggarly elements of the law, desiring to be in bondage. So God foreknew us before we knew him. And within this knowledge, coming into a relationship with him through faith in his Son, then God puts a calling on our life. That's the correct order. It's not that God calls us first. He calls us based upon his foreknowledge and him coming to know us. And that is tied into faith. It's tied into the work of the Spirit. It's tied into illumination and all these other things. So, yes, definitely not getting into the depths of that, which I went pretty far into it. I'm just looking at it more from a textual standpoint, is that you can't just substitute the word foreknowledge with foreordination. Okay, so we saw that Paul was not called a Peter. He wasn't taught the gospel by Peter, and it came through revelation. His testimony was he was a ruthless Judaizer. He wasn't a good dude. And then it pleased God to separate him, call him through grace, not according to his works, not according to whatever, but through grace. to reveal his Son in me. Here we go again. I'm trying to read it from looking here. I need to read it from looking at the text, or through the phone. To reveal his Son in me, that I might preach him among the Gentiles. I did not immediately confer with flesh and blood, nor did I go to Jerusalem to those who were apostles before me. But I went into Arabia and returned again to Damascus. Then, over here, big jump. So, then, after 3 years, I went up to Jerusalem to see Peter and remained with him for 15 years. For 15 days, for 2 weeks. Boy, it seems like if you want to know all this doctrine and be under his authority, you're going to spend longer than 2 weeks with him. And you're not going to wait 14 years to do that. So I want to come back over here and look at we were up kind of to verse 14. Sorry, no fun here. Okay, so I was advancing, Greek here, in Judaism, Judaism, above, I'm not going to read it, like I can somehow read Greek. In race mine, in my gene, far more a zealot, being for the forefathers of my traditions. But when was pleased of the theos of God, the one separating me from the womb of my mother, and calling me through grace his. All right, I've had enough of this already. Moving on from the Greek, which isn't really gonna do so much. But I saw none of the other apostles except James and the Lord's brother. Now, concerning the things before I wrote unto you, indeed before God, I don't lie. So, you know what? I never understand the idea that if it's a Roman Catholic church, why was the church in Jerusalem? I mean, if the rock of the church started the church, and it's a rock Roman, why was the church started in Jerusalem? Wouldn't the church be started in Rome? Shouldn't it be the Jerusalem Catholic Church? Because that's where it started. That's where the rock is. He's in Jerusalem. Never understood that. I'm sure a Catholic could say, okay, well, Roman doesn't remain where it began. It means where history started back under Constantinople or whatever, Constantine or whatever it is. So between that time and those 300 years, then was the church just specifically in Jerusalem or Rome? Or it's because Rome controlled Jerusalem? So Peter was Roman? Is that the line of thought? Is that how it goes? So you would think if you want a centralized hub in Rome, then you should start the church there. Okay, well, the church wasn't started there. And Peter wasn't under the authority of Rome to preach the gospel either. So Paul definitely isn't. So if that's the protocol, then Peter should be in Rome. He should be under the authority of Rome. And the Bible should call it the Roman Church, which it's not. Okay, so he wasn't known. He's giving you the story here. Now, concerning the things I wrote to you, indeed, before God, I don't lie. After I went into the regions of Syria and Cilicia, and I was unknown by the face to the churches of Judea, which are in Christ. So now you have churches other places? I thought churches were just from the Church of Rome. how can there be this word churches of Judea? It's just one church. It's the one Roman Catholic Church, one church. There can't be the idea of other churches. That makes no sense. I was known by the face to the Church of Rome, which there was some kind of gathering in Judea. No, he's calling it the churches of Judea. So, were these churches in Judea under the authority of Peter? Were they under the authority of James? Were they under the authority of an apostle? Whose authority were they under? Did Peter go up there and start the church? Or tell them what their doctrine should be? I don't think so. But then they were hearing only, he who formerly persecuted us now preached the faith, which he once tried to destroy, and they glorified God in me. So Paul, how many years was it that he went to Jerusalem? Okay, it was 13 years. So my brain, 3 years. So after 3 years of ministry, he finally goes to Jerusalem for 2 weeks, which isn't too long. And then after that, it's the 14 years. I went to Jerusalem with Barnabas and also took Titus with me. So wow, man, he must have learned a lot in 14 days if he was under the rock. Didn't he already say that he didn't receive the revelation from Peter? He received it directly from God. I think he did. And we're going to see actually more about the gospel here. We're also going to see that essentially Paul confronts Peter. So if anyone had authority to persuade somebody, Paul is saying it was me. So he went up by revelation and communicated to them the gospel which I preached among the Gentiles, but privately to those who were of reputation, lest by any means I might run or had run in vain. To those who are in reputation could mean the apostles. It probably does mean the apostles. So they were of reputation, but they weren't of authority. So he didn't say I went in there and talked to them privately, those that were the authority of the church, the Roman church that's in Jerusalem. No, he just went and talked to them. Yet not I, even Titus, who was with me being a Greek, was compelled to be circumcised. So actually, in this concept of idea of those who reputation are those that were in the church, those that are referenced to be Judaizers. It was those that was influencing the church to go back to observe elements of the law. And I stop there for a minute because there are those today that say you must observe the law, the Mosaic law. You must keep days. Oh, that's all that matters. Just keep the one day. They don't observe all the other parts of the law because I guess they're ignorant in their thoughts on the consistency if you're going to keep one law, maybe not to keep all the law. So they're just concerned about one part of the law, that they might some way glory in the fact that you keep that day. They're thinking maybe from a higher level is that we're not under the ceremonial law or under certain parts of the law, but we're just under the Sabbath law. So that's it. That's all that matters. Just keep the Sabbath. But they are people of reputation just like these. They have power, authority, they have persuasion. They think themselves to be special, and they are false brethren. And this occurs because of false brethren, secretly brought in, who came in to stealth to spy out came in by stealth to spy out our liberty, which we have in Christ Jesus, that they might bring us back into bondage. Yes, so if your goal is to bring people to the observing of the law as a means to righteousness, not just righteousness in the sense of imputed righteousness, but ongoing righteousness to remain in a right standing with God, then you are a false brother, to whom we did not yield submission even for an hour, that the truth of the gospel might continue with you. So, Paul's story isn't that he went to Jerusalem to go talk to Peter about what the truth of the gospel is. He actually went to Jerusalem with Barnabas and Titus to find these people that were spreading false gospel to the Gentiles who were believing. And he didn't even go to Peter to validate his concern. That does happen, but I'm not even sure. I'm not even going to go to the book of Acts. Was Paul involved? I think he was, when they met up to discuss what to do and what not to do on an issue. So yes, that would be the idea that there was a mutual collaborative agreement to discuss one doctrinal consideration to seek the Lord, but that isn't to infer that they were coming under the authority of Peter or the Catholic Church in any sense. So, yes, the church isn't derivative of Rome. It's not derivative of Jerusalem. The church is the body of Jesus, derivative of his authority, and it is built on all the apostles and prophets. Jesus is the head cornerstone, so that is the correct line of thought. So Peter didn't have any special authority over any of the other apostles, like the Pope would in the structure, that there was one authority above all the other apostles. Not in any sense, biblically, that is. So, those who seemed to be something, whatever they were, false brethren or Judaizers or whatever, it makes no difference to me. God shows no personal favoritism to no man. For those who seemed to be something, added nothing to me. It'd be good if you knew the Greek, then you could understand the sentence structure. Started like that, but I got tired of it quick. But we'll look at it. The ones seeming to be something, whatever sort they were, nothing to me, it makes a difference. The face of God, of a man, not partial, does receive to me. So, for the ones being influential, nothing contributed. Yeah, that wasn't so helpful now, was it? Alright, but on the contrary, when they saw that the gospel of the uncircumcision had been committed to me, as the gospel for the circumcision was to Peter, for he who worked effectively in Peter for the apostleship to the circumcision also worked effectively in me toward the Gentiles. So yes, there was definitely an effectual working of God's Spirit through Peter to lay a foundation for the Jerusalem church and for circumcision, along with James and John. They all were the pillars, but they were not the rock. They were pillars built upon the rock, who is Jesus. So yes, it's not to say that Peter didn't have authority and that he didn't help build the church. He is just not the church. He isn't the head of the church. and everything comes from him. He wasn't in Rome, never claimed it to be Roman, and the church isn't Catholic under his authority. The church is one under the authority of Jesus. It's a spiritual body. It's not a literal, physical structure built on the earth. It's one that emanates from heaven through a spiritual body. So when James and Cephas and John, who seemed to be pillars, perceived the grace that had been given to me, they told me all the doctrines that I should know and follow, because he is the rock and he is the authority of the church. And I learned everything from him, and I submitted unto him through fellowship under his authority. When I say these things, that's precisely what the Anglican church priests did. They're coming under the authority of the Pope, which the Pope is the substitution of Peter, or it's the vicar of Christ. It's the authority of all authorities above the church visibly on the earth. But nope, it's not how it worked. They perceived the grace that had been given unto me. They gave me and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship, that we should go unto the Gentiles, and they to the circumcision. They desired only that we should remember the poor, the very thing which I was eager to do. So the only thing they were admonishing Paul to do was, hey dude, remember the poor. Not, hey dude, this is your theology. Or, hey dude, I'm the authority, come back to me soon and we'll have a talk. That way the church is structured correctly and people won't get confused. Now when Peter had come to Antioch, I withstood him to the face, because he was to be blamed. What? Who gives you the right to do that? Peter's the authority here. You're going to go to the Pope and tell the Pope that you're a hypocrite. What? What are you talking about, Paul? All right, so we're going to stop here. 30 minutes into this thing, I told you this was the worst Bible study you're ever going to have. I'm sure if somehow you've clicked off here to be Catholic, you're going to say, well, that's not what we believe. You're kind of conflating things. There is probably potentially a little bit of a truth to that. I haven't studied church history, the thing that you want to throw onto me and say, when I say I haven't studied church history, I have, but I don't know it as well as you do. My point is, for all of this, is that church history began right here. It began with Paul and Peter. And if you want to delegate how church history began, you better go back to see how it began in the Bible, in the text of scriptures, and the authority of the scriptures, not 300 years later. So if you want to argue history versus the Bible, then I'll argue that. So clearly, the text of Scripture does not align with the concepts that the Roman Catholic Church portrays as the authority of the church, the one true church. And it's clear here in how Paul started his ministry and his relationship back to Peter in Jerusalem, which is clearly not how the Roman Catholic Church teaches the authority emanates and comes from the Pope, and how all these other people under them, cardinals, relate back to him, and how priests in the structure relate back to the cardinals. That structure isn't biblical. Paul did not function that way when he appointed elders in every city. Peter didn't function that way when other churches started. So, yes, it's clearly a false religion based upon man, as Paul says. When he received the revelation, he didn't receive it from man, he received it from God. And the revelation that is taught by the Roman Catholic Church has come from Rome. It's come from a digression of the pagan beliefs then. It's an integration of those and brought into probably some forms of proper theology, but otherwise it's a twisting of theology, twisting of the Bible to accommodate a Roman authority of a fallen pagan government and tradition of the people. Of the people, by the people, for the people, no. Of the Roman government, of its authority, with some of the traditions of the people in place. So, yes, the authority emanates from the power of the state. Alright, well, I'll probably never upload this video, but if I do, share some thoughts. Maybe if this has changed your thinking, which if you're a Catholic, maybe it may have, but if it doesn't, I'm sure that you can leave some comments to straighten me out, so go for it.